Everyone, factoring into today's video, we're doing a big update today. It's JMA Friday, so we've got the month ahead from Japan, taking us into December, up to around the 11th of December. Also have a look at the Beijing Climate Centre for the coming month as well. But we've also got the Japanese update from the seasonal model. So we're going to look at the coming 3 months as well, December, January and February, covering the whole of the winter period. So perhaps it's JMA Mega Friday today, a big update coming up. Before I get on with that, just want to mention the ads. There's links to articles on all my pages at gaswebbies.com. Have a browse through the widget. If there's any articles that you're interested in, just click through. You'll have to go off and read those articles, and you'll be helping to support gaswebbies.com by doing that. I'm also trying out some video ads. They're from AOL, so see what you think to that. Very pleased about these video ads coming to gaswebbies.com. Have a look at the video ads, press play, see what they're about. They should be ever changed, so you shouldn't be stuck with the same one. If you press play on the video ad, you have to support gaswebbies.com. Thanks so much for doing that. Right, we better get on with it because we've got a lot to discuss today. So we're going to start off with the month ahead forecast from the Japanese model. These are 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. The first weekly period taking us from the 13th to the 20th of November. First thing to say is that the British Isles is upside down on these charts just there. Blue extrapolating to below average heights or low pressure. Orange extrapolating to above average heights or high pressure. So for the coming week, we've got a trough of low pressure sitting around in just to the west of the country. A ridge is up to the east and the northeast of the country. The flow is something like that. So it's relatively mild, and it's also quite unsettled as well. Bouts of rain coming in off the Atlantic, coming up against this ridge. Actually, it could be quite wet at times in the west. And I think that's a pretty good representation of the weather through the coming week. Now, to move through to the second week period, and this one takes us from the 20th of November to the 27th, it's a very similar scenario, really. We've still got the trough out to the west, a deep trough of low pressure to the west of the country. The ridge, if anything, is being pushed a little bit further back. So, if anything, that's more unsettled, probably, for that week through the 20th to the 27th of November. If anything, that trough is more influential there, so that could be very unsettled, very wet week, particularly in the west, less so for the east, but I think all areas at risk of rain at times. Again, the flow is generally from the southwest or the south, so it's going to be mild, certainly not cold on that sort of scenario, just very unsettled really going up to the end of November. And then the final 2 week period, taking us from the 27th of November to the 11th of December, is similar really. The ridge is coming back a little bit to the east, so if anything, the ridge is starting to strengthen again up towards Scandinavia. That's fairly interesting. We've also got the ridge down to the south, so the trough here is being squeezed up to the northwest a little bit. It means that for many eastern and some parts of the country, it could be turning drier for the start of December, whereas the rain could be more up to the northwest of the country. The flow is still generally off the Atlantic, like that, and actually it could be really very mild indeed with this ridge building to the south. So yeah, we've got high pressure to the south and to the east, low pressure to the west and the northwest. So it means that for the northwest it's going to be more unsettled. Driest for the southeast, could be turning quite mild in the south and the east, although any more influence from that ridge, and actually it could start to turn colder because of course we'll start having to think about frost really at night. So that's quite an interesting one, what's going on there. It's close to becoming a little bit colder with frost, but generally it is still quite mild, but it's turning more settled, I think, as we get towards the start of December on that one. The Beijing Climate Centre month-ahead forecast, these are 500 millibar heights broken down into 10-day periods, looks very similar really for the 10-day period from the 16th to the 25th of November. The deep trough is out to the west and into the British Isles. The ridge here with these orange colours is over to the east. The flow is coming off the Atlantic and then going something like that. So again, it's pretty mild, it's quite unsettled, particularly to the west, but all areas would have some bouts of rain coming through. Excuse me, we move through to the next 10-day period, this one taking us from the 26th of November through to the 5th of December. Similar idea to the JMA, really. The ridge, the trough I should say, is being pushed out towards the west a little bit. signs of the heights building more towards the east. The flow again generally coming up from a southerly to southeasterly type direction, so it's still pretty mild. It's turning less unsettled really, but the northwest could still be quite wet on that sort of solution. And yeah, it's just turning drier, still quite mild. If the ridge gets any more influential, it could start getting colder at night. Notice we've got quite a bit of northern blocking showing up here around Greenland, but I'm not sure that's really been too impactful at this stage. It's generally the Atlantic and the ridge to the east that's dominating. Now, as we go through to the final 10-day period, going up to the middle of December, this one takes from the 6th to the 15th of December. If anything, the trough starts to come back again, so the below average heights in the Atlantic pushing back in. The ridge going more up towards Scandinavia. I think we're still basically in a very unsettled mode there with that, and turning more unsettled, if anything, through to the middle of December, with that ridge gradually being pushed back up towards Scandinavia. It's quite difficult, these charts are quite difficult really to be describing, because they are unsettled on the face of it, but it's just whether that ridge to the east gets more influential. The indications, you have to read between the lines with some of these long-range models, and my guess is that as we're getting towards the start of December, that ridge towards the east could be starting to get a little bit more influential. If it gets up to Scandinavia and starts becoming more influential, as this sort of is implying it could do, then we may have to start thinking about colder easterly winds. But overall, the general idea, I think, for the coming month is generally quite mild and quite unsettled, most unsettled in the west. If we have a look at the Beijing Climate Centre temperature anomaly for the month, this is from the 16th to the 16th of November to 15th of December, we're coming out warmer than average. We're on the milder side of average. By the way, notice how cold it's going to be for the coming month across many eastern parts of the United States. Really severely cold there for the time of year. But for us anyway, it's looking like it's going to be a milder than average month coming up, although perhaps not as much as you will think looking at the anomaly charts, and that could just be because the ridge to the east is at times getting a little bit more influential, possibly bringing us the risk of some frost. The rainfall anomaly is also coming out wetter than average from the 16th of November to the 15th of December, so mild and unsettled. Looks like it's going to be the cool for the coming month, but within that there could be, perhaps particularly around the start of December, there could be some sort of cooler interlude, possibly with some frost at night. We'll keep an eye on it. Now, as I say, I've also had the update from the JMA for the coming season. This is the 3 monthly forecast, Northern Hemisphere view. We'll have a look at this when I do the seasonal model roundup for the winter at the end of the month. But there's a lot of information that you can glean from the JMA, and I won't have time to go in depth into it all, actually, when I do the seasonal model roundup video at the end of November. So I'll have a bit of a more in-depth look today. I'm going to start off with December. As I say, this is the Northern Hemisphere view. 500 millibar heights again. Same idea as before. Blue is extrapolating to low pressure, yellow is extrapolating to high pressure, and orange is extrapolating high pressure. So the coming month is sort of, for December, it's looking like that, with a deep trough of low pressure really in the Atlantic, ridging to the south of the country, and over to the east as well. So it's generally unsettled for December. If this is right, it's also quite mild. The flow is off the Atlantic. So Atlantic driven areas of low pressure coming in, going to be quite a mild month if that comes off. Going through to January, the 500 millibar height anomaly looks very similar for January. Again, we've got the trough of low pressure below average heights out in the Atlantic to the northwest of the country. The ridge with the orange colours is down to the south through the Azores, ridging through the Mediterranean as well. So the flow again is off the Atlantic like that. It's generally mild and unsettled for January. Of course, these are anomalies, so there will be deviations through the month. I wouldn't necessarily say the whole of January will be a mild, wet sort of write-off. There could be cold snaps coming through, but that's the anomaly for the month, and it is a milder and more unsettled scenario, particularly unsettled up to the northwest, less so for the south and southeast. Now, as we get through to February, a very different pattern emerges for February. We've got lots of blocking suddenly appearing up over Greenland with these yellow and orange colours. The above average heights to the south are going, it's weakening, that yellow to the south. We've more or less got a trough over the top of the British Isles. So a very dramatic pattern change is taking place here as we go from December and January into February. And if this is right, this could be a much colder pattern as we get through into February. We could start to bring some very cold air down into that trough of low pressure sitting over the British Isles. That could be quite snowy and very cold if that's right. That is very extensive blocking being indicated there for February up over Greenland and stretching up to the North Pole as well. Very extensive northern blocking indeed. For such a long way out where you would think the signal would be much weaker by the time you get to February, that's a very strong pattern there for blocking. So I have to see how that plays out, but that's very interesting what that's showing for February. Have a look at the mid-latitude view for the next 3 months from the Japanese bar. The British Isles is right over the top of the, right at the side of the chart, I should say, in the top right-hand side as you're looking at it, just up there. So that's the 500 millibar height anomaly again for December. Generally quite mild. The low pressure is out to the west, bringing the Atlantic winds through. Could be a very unsettled month. Temperature anomalies are coming out on the milder side of average in those green colours just there. The wind flow is generally off the Atlantic, as you see from these arrows here, or maybe you can't see it, it's not that easy to make out, but the wind flow is off the Atlantic. And the rainfall anomaly for December is coming out wetter than average, no surprise with such a deep trough out in the Atlantic. For January, the anomaly looks like this. Again, trough of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, ridging down to the south. So it's a strong westerly flow coming through again for January. The temperature anomaly is coming out on the milder side of average. The wind arrows indicate that we're bringing westerlies through off the Atlantic Ocean as well. And the precipitation anomaly again in those blue colours, so we're coming out wetter than average once again for January. But remember, February was the month that shows a very dramatic change in the circulation pattern over the northern hemisphere, across the North Pole, I should say. You can't really see it from this view because the North Pole is cut off. That's why I wanted to start with the North Pole. But you can see the trough there sitting over the top of the country. And if you could go up to the North Pole, you would see lots of extensive blocking up there. Now look at this. The temperature anomaly for February is coming out colder than average, significantly colder than average actually, and that stretches through most of Europe as well. The wind flow, if you can make out the arrows, are coming from a northerly, northeasterly direction for February. So that's why that cold air is coming down with all of that blocking in the north. Rainfall anomaly, obviously it's a drier month, although precipitation is being predicted, and much of that would be snow, of course, because we're bringing down those very cold Arctic winds. So a really interesting update there from the JMA. It could be a long winter if you want it cold. It could be that you've got to wait a long time, but eventually when you get to February, if that's right, we could get a big payoff, and we could be in for quite a cold February there. We're going to have to see how that develops. I'm quite shocked by how strong that blocking anomaly is for February. If it was anywhere near right, it would be a really cold month, I think. But of course, this could be moderated as we go through December and January's updates. We may find that sort of signal being moderated down. But on the face of it, this month's update anyway, signalling from the Japanese model, signalling a really cold February. Hope you found the video interesting. We'll be doing the weekend forecast tomorrow, so come back for that. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching.